Hello, everybody. Hope you are all doing well. Hope that y'all are having a great evening. Just a second, guys. Getting myself all set up here. All right. Okay. We should be good to go now. Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. Hope you are excited for tonight's reading. Want to let you know a few things before we get started. So, first of all, Shogun of Crime, the story that we are currently in the middle of reading, is only 21 or 22 chapters long as of the writing of this, and we are on chapter 14 tonight. So, as you can probably tell, we are getting very close to the end of the reading, at least for now, until I find the time to come back and finish writing it. And before anyone asks how long it will take me to finish writing it, I don't know. I'm in the middle of trying to get another book done that I want to get published, which will take a lot of my time in terms of writing. So I don't know when Shogun of Crime will be 100% finished. I want to get it done. I think I'm about halfway through the story as it is, but I did want to read it to you guys because you guys asked for me to read it, and I do like this story, so I'm excited to keep reading this with you guys. Secondly, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys fair warning now, and I don't know why I'm making this warning. There's only 5 of you watching, but it's okay. These next few chapters are going to get a little dark. Because like I said, Shogun of Crime is the retelling of Oda Nobunaga's life, but in a more modern day sense, in a more modern city type scenario. So because of that, there are aspects to it that will reflect incidences in Nobunaga's life, and Oda Nobunaga did some pretty awful things, but I wanted to keep it all true to that. So these next few chapters are going to get dark. I will go ahead and warn you of that now. If you do not feel comfortable listening to some of this stuff, I totally understand. Oh, I'm a little low. Sorry, Hannah. 1 second. Let me see. That should be a little louder. Let me see. Okay. How's that? Is that any better? It should be. Maybe I can adjust the mic itself. 1 second. Testing, testing, testing. Okay, that should be a bit better. All right, so, like I said, ooh, that's a little too loud. I just checked it myself. That's a little too loud. Go back down a bit. There we go. Okay, that should be good. All right, like I said, what we're going to be reading is going to be a little dark, so just be aware of that. Okay, so we are going into chapter 14. We last left off with Oichi Taiga in the hospital. So, let us begin. Oh, and for those who wanted to know, this chapter was written February 29th, 2020. So this chapter is almost 5 years old. There we go. Sitting in the hospital bed felt like its own degree of prison for Oichi. She looked out the window by her bed at the city from her 5th floor window. She had plenty of money from her late husband to spend on the more luxurious accommodations, and yet it still felt too constricting. She felt like the white, clean walls were a little too judgmental. The pressed and itchy bed sheets were too thin. The feathered pillow crunched when she rolled her head. It should all have made her feel comfortable, but she currently felt anxious and unnerved. The near-death experience with that serial killer had shown her just how vulnerable she was now, and also how treacherous even her allies could be. She knew Young would betray her, but even this had gone beyond her notice. "Miss Taiga, are you all right?" Marcus whispered. "I'm fine, Marcus." She had almost forgotten he was there. "You seem distracted." "It's nothing. Shikataganai," she answered. "I'm sorry, what?" "It means it can't be helped. My father would say it any time things did not go the way he intended. Just finish telling me our situation, please." Marcus had visited her frequently since her stay here. The surgery to remove the bullet from her stomach had been successful and short. She'd only had to stay another day or two and then she would be released. But business does not wait. Marcus would regularly keep her up to date with the syndicate's current standing, and it usually wasn't good. All right, well, 3 of our drug warehouses were ransacked, and the product inside was thoroughly destroyed. We're taking a couple $100,000 in losses from that alone. Our arms dealers managed to stay out of the way of it, but they're being secretive and discreet right now. It'd be too dangerous to start moving openly again while we're still dealing with potential turncoats. "Turncoats?" Oichi asked. It's a Western phrase. It means traitors. I like it. It has a very nice ring for such a disgusting term. Marcus paused, uncertain how to interpret that response. Was she making a joke or warning him not to bring up the incidents that just happened again? He didn't want to risk it, so he moved on. "Well, as for our ties to the cartels, only one is still loyal. The others are a bit shaken. I think they see us as questionable. We'll change their tune. It would be unwise to try and force them to rejoin us. I'm not so stupid as to convert by the sword, Oichi sighed, laying her head back and fuming. It seemed so much easier, though, when you could force others around. What was the use in having muscle if you couldn't flex it? But that begged the question, what muscle did they really have left? Young had been a fool, but his actions had crippled the business considerably. She'd actually smirked when reading about his suicide in the newspaper. Speaking of which, there's something else I want to talk to you about, Marco spoke up. There's a youth activity center in one of our controlled districts. It's largely a place for Muslim youths to find social activities, but we have substantial evidence that it's a breeding ground for some Islamic extremists. Terrorism activities, which he shrugged. I'm not going to chase after a group of religious radicals right now. Marcus didn't stop. He pulled up his chair and started pulling a few photos from his jacket pocket. Normally I'd agree with you, but there's more to it than just that. One of our territories of protection has been dealing with harassment from some of these radicals. A religious war? I guess something like that, but the territory has plenty of Muslim families also suffering from these radicals. Oichi's eyes narrowed darkly. Infighting among the Muslim population? That could be a problem for the community. That's not the issue we have either. It's the MCP. MCP? The Muslim Community Patrol. They're a self-proclaimed defense group who act like police officers but only work within the Muslim community. They've become a gang in their own right, muscling in on non-Muslim properties and bullying more moderate Muslim families. Boss, these families pay us for protection. They've appreciated the safety we provide. If we don't do something, contact the police. Can't they do something about this nonsense? Oichi asked. We're not exactly in a fit state to wage war with the MCP or with a supposed religious radical group. Marcus nodded darkly but nudged the photos forward anyway. These are some of the more recent actions. Oichi took up the photos to look. The first few were nothing serious, broken shop windows and Quran verses spray painted on cars and walls. There was one burning car and what looked like a threatening message on a sidewalk. But as the pictures became more graphic, Oichi's eyes widened. A woman beaten savagely, an old Jewish man bloodied and on the ground. There was even what looked frighteningly like a dead man covered in bruises and cuts, as if he'd been stoned. Marcus nodded his head in confirmation. His name was Jackson Fletcher. He was a homosexual. Okay, so maybe they're rabble-rousers. Again, can't the police handle this? I feel for these people, but the police have tried, ma'am. But there's not much they can do, hashtag not all Muslims. And what the hell does that mean? It's a trend that's popular these days. When a person commits a crime, it's easy to, assume that all of them are guilty by association. And when a Muslim commits a crime, the community rushes to their defense because anyone generalizing all Muslim territories are violent. You can't be serious. You're telling me the police can't touch them for publicity reasons? Oichi gasped. That's why I've brought it to your attention. If the police won't touch it... Let me think about what to do. Oichi finally nodded. Maybe winning some favor back from the community will help the family in the long run. But we can't afford to go storming a youth center without reason. We also can't ignore these people we promised to look out for, though. Marcus gave a relieved sigh. I'll do some digging and figure out what we could be the best option for. There was a knock at the door. It opened and Marcus stood up while Oichi sat up in surprise. There, standing in his police uniform and looking rather professional and handsome, was Todd. He looked at Marcus and gave a polite nod. Good afternoon, sir. Are you a friend of Miss Oichi? He said, frowning and excusing himself. I was just leaving. Oichi gave a polite bow to him as he marched past, his displeasure apparent. As he closed the door behind him, Marcus hurried to Oichi and sat down across from her, taking Marcus's old seat. How are you feeling? Are you still sore? I know what it's like to be hit by a bullet. You just visited me this morning. Don't you have duty? Oichi teased, giggling excitedly, secretly glad he was here. I can take a little break. My partner will understand a detour for someone like you. He leaned close and planted a kiss on Oichi's head, sending her heart spiraling into a swelling sea of glee. She had to stop herself from squealing like a little girl. You worry too much, she laughed. Said the lady nearly killed. By the way, we have the killer in custody. He's a likely suspect for a string of serial murders. We'll break him before long, and it's all right, Todd. He didn't kill me, and I'm all right, she smiled. In truth, she wanted Todd not to focus on that killer, whoever he was. If Todd dug too much into him, he'd spill why he was there to kill her, and that was a secret she wasn't ready for Todd to hear. Let's not worry about it now, okay? Todd gave a grunt of disapproval, but nodded all the same. She sat up slightly to lean closer. There was something about being closer to Todd that made her happy, a sensation she both loved and despised. How could some single man, a police officer no less, spark such feelings in her? And yet she couldn't deny them either. Marcus was right not to like this relationship. It went against everything she was stood for. But it was not her choice to make who she fell for. Could she live with this? Could she keep this game going and her syndicate at the same time? As the two began to talk of other things, suddenly Todd's radio came on and began to speak. "Hey, Todd, we got a call of assault and battery 6 blocks from here. We got to get going." Todd groaned but answered. "Is it near the Divine Youth Facility again? The report was called in from Alzara Avenue, only a few miles away, so you do the math, Chief." Todd groaned. 10-4, right. He turned off the radio and stood up. "Sorry, I gotta go." "What's the Divine Youth Facility?" which he asked curiously, though a part of her suspected the answer. "Nothing you have to worry about. Not a big deal. Just every few days we get some kind of call about vandalism or assault within a few miles of that place. We think it's just some childish pranksters who frequent it, but until now we can't prove anything, and the brass won't let us near the place." "Sounds like more than pranksters to me if we're talking assault," Oichi frowned. "Todd, you mentioned the other day that there's been a rise in potential terrorist activity in the city. Does this have... No. I shouldn't have mentioned that to you. That stuff... We can't talk about that openly." Todd cautioned, silencing her. "Listen, Oichi, it's nothing you need to worry about. You get released soon, right? And we'll have dinner. The night you're out, we can talk and... we'll just have a good time together. I don't want you stressing over this kind of stuff." He kissed Oichi's cheek and walked out the door, but Oichi's eyes narrowed darkly. "Can't talk openly," Oichi hissed. "Then maybe it can't be solved openly either. Sorry, Todd, but I think I need to look into this myself." She reached for her phone and began dialing. "Marcus," she said quickly, "there's been an incident in Alzara Avenue. Police suspect it has to do with the youth facility you mentioned. Todd wouldn't mention anything to me, but I think there's more to it than even you mentioned." "Any particular reason you think that, ma'am?" "On our last date, Todd mentioned a growing concern of terrorist activity, I think. I tried to bring it up out from him now, but he quickly shut me down, saying it wasn't something we could discuss. Why bring it up one night and then be quiet about it later?" "Probably doesn't want to worry you, my guess." "Maybe, but there's more to it than that. He said the police can't touch the facility. Too much red tape and publicity problems, like you said, but Todd is sure it's organizing from there. And if he's concerned about terrorist threats, rising in a terror activity..."
"Well, what are you suggesting, ma'am?"
"The longer we sit on this information with no acting, the more likely something worse than a few beat-up civilians will take place. I want to arrange a meeting with myself and the facility coordinator. I want a word with them."
"I can do that."
"In the meantime, we need to run damage control. Check on our properties and support in the local neighborhoods and apartment complexes. Make sure they're all right. If we're going to pull ourselves back from this brink, we need social support as much as we need better security."
"I've got some trusted associates on that, but Miss Taiga, I should point out that even if we win the support of the community, our little incident has made us way too vulnerable. A community of civilians can't be protected if we can't protect ourselves."
Marcus pointed all this out wisely. Oichi leaned back and stared out the window again, thinking on that truth. When she first came to the city, she knew it was sick, dying from a festering plague of corruption and criminal infighting. She'd kept the violence she'd caused to a minimum, worked hard to restore the family organization she'd inherited, and she'd built strong ties in the community and had won the favor of the populace. And yet she'd been blind. She'd nearly lost everything because of her inability to anticipate treachery, her inability to look untouchable. That had to change. It was as her father had said as a little girl.
Miss Taiga?"
"A tiger mother must handle her cubs with care and with affection, firm but loving. However, should the mother show weakness, it and her cubs will become prey. Therefore, the tiger mother cannot show weakness even around her cubs. To rule the jungle, a tiger must remain ruthless."
"I don't understand."
"I've not been ruthless enough, Marcus. In my attempt to win favor, I forgot that rule. I will not convert by the sword, but I will rule by it. Maybe it's time that I showed this city who I really am and what I'm really capable of." A cold silence fell over Marcus. His hands trembled at the very tangible threat.
"May I ask how?"
"Time will tell. Arrange the meeting. I'll be waiting for your call."
Oichi hung up before Marcus could answer. She then lay back and began contemplating her moves. In this game of chess, she had made a mistake and lost her bishops, which controlled the board. And with her next move, she might put the queen herself in danger. But it would be worth it to remind the opposition that the queen does exist. But a show of force would not be enough, not unless it carries value and purpose. As her plan began to unfold in her mind, Oichi's eyes flashed with a predatory hunger. The tigress was on the prowl once again. And that was chapter 14.
Chapter 15. The youth center was called the Faithful Haven Youth Center. It looked very close to what Oichi had pictured it to be. It was a large and very open building, nestled around a semicircle of trees. A single road led off the highway and into the parking lot, with trees acting like a natural barrier to hide it from prying eyes. Oichi found this amusing, considering what this place might be hiding. And a parking lot itself was sparse, with only about 5 or 6 cars there right now. Oichi and Marcus stepped out of her car and walked towards the entrance of the facility, and Marcus looked around, noticing 2 tan men wearing what looked like police uniforms, and they had guns on their hips. "Heads up, boss. The MCP is on to us. We should have brought more people." "With any luck, we won't need them," she replied. They walked past the MCP and into the building. The main lobby was clean and looked very inviting. There were a pair of double doors which led back to what appeared to be a basketball court, and another door to the right, which had an older man with a thick gray beard standing outside of it. He was professionally dressed, and his balding head had scraggly hair on top. He had a cool look about his eyes, a calculating stare. As he looked over at Oichi, she could tell that he was sizing her up, taking her in. She returned his glare, and she smirked, recognizing a twinge of discomfort coming from him. She wasn't one to easily be intimidated. "Good afternoon," Oichi said. "Are you Mr. Habaza?"
"Yes, it is nice to meet you, Miss Taiga." He gave a respectful bow of the head and held out his hand, which Oichi shook. "To what do I owe the visit? Your friend didn't explain very well."
"This won't take long. Do you have some place private we can talk?" Oichi asked.
Mr. Habaza gave another curt nod and opened the door he was standing in front of. Inside were 2 cushioned chairs, a large mahogany desk, and a swivel chair behind it. There was a tall bookshelf beside the desk filled with books, statues, and trinkets. An Arabic dagger sat on the desk as well, sheathed. Habaza walked around to sit behind his desk and closed a book he'd had open, putting away his laptop. Oichi took a seat across from him, and Marcus started to join her.
"Marcus, kindly wait outside," Oichi urged.
"But ma'am,
It'll be fine, Marcus. Kindly wait for me," she instructed a bit more forcefully.
Marcus gave a disapproving glare, but nodded, walking out again. When the door was closed, he leaned back and crossed a leg in front of Habaza, making him clearly a little disgruntled.
"You know, there's this excellent phrase I've heard since coming to America. Getting to brass tacks," Oichi smiled. "I love the phrase. It's really catchy. It reminds me of the Shakespeare phrase that brevity is the soul of wit. Such fancy ways to not beat around the bush."
"Isn't that what you're doing now?" Habaza challenged.
"I'm making a point, Mr. Habaza. I'm giving you a warning. I don't care for those who waste time or evade a direct answer. So don't try to dodge my questions. And I have quite a few of them."
Habaza frowned and crossed his fingers over each other, resting his elbows on the desk. "It is rather rude for a guest to make threats to their host."
"I'm not making a threat, Mr. Habaza. I'm simply stating the facts as they stand. And one fact I can't overlook is the amount of questionable activities happening in my territories."
"Your territories? You mean the peaceful neighborhoods and apartments you force to pay for your protection?" Habaza challenged.
"I don't force them to do anything. Those individuals asked me to give them protection."
And this was true. After her initial takeover and defeat of the nearby delinquent groups and street punks, many shops and apartment dwellers asked if they could be brought under the fold of the Taiga Syndicate. No extortion was forced.
"But more to the point, for the last few months, plenty of vandalisms, assaults, and nuisances have been happening in the local communities, and plenty of the suspects have ties to this youth facility."
"Miss Taiga, you can't honestly suggest we have something to do with that."
"Mr. Habaza, I don't like it when people tell me what I can or can't do, especially when it comes to speaking my mind."
Oichi hissed this darkly, her glare returning. But instead of shrinking back, Habaza leaned forward and pressed back with a fierce gaze of his own. This was a man who would not break easily. "When my uncle built this facility, Miss Taiga, I was creating a home and job opportunities and resources for dozens of struggling Muslim families who have dealt with discrimination in the community for years. To suggest we would do anything to upset the community and dishonor our reputation is nothing short of insulting," Habaza explained forcefully. "Now, I'm not saying that haven't been problems in the community lately, and I have already spoken to the police about it. The MCP is already investigating the perpetrators, and they will be dealt with in due time. Let us clean up our own messes, yes?" He sighed and leaned back. "You are from Japan, yes? Surely you can respect and understand how difficult it is to thrive in a country and culture so different from your own. We have made a future for ourselves here, a future we built for ourselves. This community is strong and has no need for help from the local police, nor do we need it from you and your gang of thugs."
"Mr. Habaza, you can dispense with the preaching. We're in a youth facility, not a mosque," Oichi growled.
Don't play the discrimination card on me either. I've seen your community. I've worked with it. After I cleaned up the real punks and thugs off its streets, the people were more than willing and capable to start producing and working happily along with myself and my organization. I don't think they expected a new threat coming from their own community members, and yet here we are. You think that the members of Faithful Haven are responsible for your recent troubles? Then prove it. The police have proof. Why don't you ask your MCP to hand over the rest of it for you? We deal with our own problems. Or were you not listening? And you're about to become my problem, Mr. Habaza. Would you like to know how I deal with my problems? Oichi's voice was fierce, a taste of venom on her tongue. Any lesser man might have shrunk back from her, but Habaza was just as stern. He was holding his ground with the tigress, and she knew he would not break. Why don't you tell me what it is you want from me, Miss Taiga? Habaza finally growled. What I want is clarification. For the sake of this community and the Muslims and non-Muslims living in it, I want to know who in your facility is behind these events, and I want them brought forward. If it isn't the Faithful Haven's fault and merely the action of a select few, turn them over to the police and all of this goes away. But if it is the fault of your youth center, then this is your first and only warning, Mr. Habaza. Your MCP might be enough to sway the police, but it won't stop me. I will turn your world upside down until I find the vermin that are spreading their filth on these streets. Oichi finished and leaned forward at last, waiting for Habaza to speak. It was his move, and he simply glared at her dangerously. Miss Taiga, I'm very sorry to say this, but I can't help you, he replied. You are not law enforcement, and you are certainly not a queen or saint for who I am to bow. I have cooperated with the police as much as I am able, and as I told you, the MCP are investigating the incidents. So that's your answer, Oichi asked. That is my answer, he sneered. But I suppose I should thank you, Miss Taiga. Your concern for our people and this community are very apparent, and it is my sincerest hope that nothing more happens to hurt or disrupt your people. Oichi's eyes widened. She felt her jaw clench at that very clear threat. Mr. Habaza, you said it's rude for a guest to threaten their host. Is it perhaps more appropriate for a host to threaten their guest? Miss Taiga, there is no threat. Merely stating facts as they are. Habaza smiled darkly, throwing the words that Oichi had used earlier right back in her face. I'm sure you can find your own way out. I'd walk you out myself, but there's much I need to do here. Oichi rose from her seat and turned, walking to the door, more shaken than she wanted to admit. As she touched the doorknob, she looked back at Habaza, the tiger in her eyes. Pretenses aside, she snarled, I will burn your world to the ground and scatter your ashes to the wind. Pretenses aside, Habaza hissed back, we have stood against your kind since the days of our prophet, and we do not fear the likes of you. Oichi marched out of the building, away with Marcus by her side. She said nothing until they got out of the parking lot and into the highway. It was one of the few times Oichi felt genuinely flustered and unnerved. Ma'am, what happened in there? That Habaza is twisted, she hissed. He's a wolf, and that center is a den of wolves. So you do think he's behind the attacks and incidents in the community? Marcus asked. I have no doubt that he is, and even if he's not it directly, he knows the ones who are guilty, and he's protecting them, Oichi nodded. And before I left, he made a final threat that he's just only getting started. Okay. What are we going to do? We could do a little damage to the center if you like. One good dumpster fire, maybe we hit their books. No, that's the worst part, Oichi whispered. We can't touch them. Well, why not? Marcus asked. Oichi stayed silent a long moment. Marcus was bright. He'd figured out for himself given time, but time wasn't on their side. With each ticking second, the gears of fate turned onward. Habaza was likely already planning new events, new assaults, new public disturbances. Minor things, really. Things that she could and should overlook, but now she couldn't. She simply couldn't ignore this. That Habaza had thrown down the gauntlet, and now she would respond. But how? We can't just deal with this as we always have. The Faithful Haven Youth Center is a key part of this community. Even if they're just a nest of vipers, the people of this area see them as safe, a beacon of unity. If we just go attacking and screwing with the Haven, then we lose their trust. And we only feed more converts and delinquents to that youth center, and then we become their new target. You should have heard the way that Habaza talked. He is a classic victimhood screeching moron. He sees the world as his enemy and thus is hostile towards it. All right, the last thing we should do is feed their fire. I get that. That explains why the police won't touch this one. And we're faced with the exact same red tape, Oichi nodded. Well, we can't just ignore it, Marcus grumbled. What do you suggest we do? Have some of our sellers and peddlers circulate in the streets that the youth center's associated with. Keep an eye out for anything we can use. Evidence that can pin the criminals to the Faithful Haven. Maybe if we can't touch them directly, we'll dig up enough dirt that the police will finally have no choice but to pursue it.
Well, that's really reserved of you, man, if I may say so, Marcus growled. I admit, I was kind of hoping for some shock and awe.
There are right ways to do things and easy ways to do things. Shock and awe is the easy way, and we can't afford the easy way right now,
Oichi replied. But deep in her mind, she agreed with Marcus. How she would love to go all out on that center, to just raid it and find the ones responsible for these crimes. She'd drag them out by the hair and make them beg for mercy, and Habaza would watch from the side, giving a reminder of who is in charge. But that couldn't happen, not if she wanted to maintain her place in the community.
Take us home, Marcus. I need some rest.
Would you like to call that Todd fellow?
Not right now.
Oichi blushed, though, smiling. The thought of Todd bringing some weightlessness to her shoulders.
Maybe later. I'd love to have something to look forward to later. When things start looking up.
Oh, how she hoped things would start looking up soon. Oichi couldn't shake this feeling that a dark and very dangerous cloud was rolling over her. A change of fate was coming. A divine wind was blowing down a new destiny. And she was terrified of where it would lead. And that was chapter 15. Moving quick. I like that. I get a drink real quick and we'll read 16. All right. Weeks passed in disgusting and distasteful silence for Oichi. Nothing had changed significantly, and as she sat behind her desk at home, poring over incoming reports, her teeth grit in anger. She managed to make a few recoveries after the betrayal of the late mayor candidate. A few of his former associates were now crawling back, and with the help of their alliance and protected gun-running industry, they were able to keep things relatively secure. Their margins were slimmer, but growing. If left alone, they might even be able to start expanding again in a month or two, but there was something deeply wrong with the situation. A dark foreboding in her heart. She couldn't begin her conquest again. She couldn't keep expanding influence as things stood right now. Informants on the street kept pouring in new information about the movements of the youth incoming and outgoing out of the youth center. Vandalisms and assault cases were growing, but nothing was substantial enough to warrant a response. It was as if they were taunting her and the police themselves. A challenge to even try striking back in the name of the community, only to lose the community's trust in the process. It was all a disgusting series of circumstances, and Oichi hated it to her core. As her fingers strummed the desk, her mind was hardly on income reports and growth rates. It was on how to deal with the blasted Haven Center. Miss Taiga? Oichi glanced up, grateful for the break in monotony, to see Marcus at her door. His face carried an urgent seriousness that she hadn't seen in a while from him, which brought Oichi to a more stiff position in her seat.
Marcus, what is it?
I got a letter for you, ma'am, he said quickly, hurrying over with an envelope. Oichi took the letter and ripped off the seal to open it.
You seem awfully shook up over a letter, she replied.
As she opened it, Marcus stayed off to the side. It's who the letter's from, ma'am. Look at the seal. Oichi glanced at the seal over the envelope. It was a falcon, wings outstretched as its talons clutched a hollyhock. She'd not seen such a lovely visage before since coming to New Mercia. That's the family crest of Iluiano, a Sicilian mafia family with deep roots in New Mercia since the 20s.
What, are they wanting in on our turf war? She asked. She slid out the paper from within and read it silently, leaning forward in her chair as each sentence grabbed her further and further. A smile began to creep across her face as she took in the message's contents. A meeting?
The Iluiano family was very prominent back in the day, but now they're just bootleggers and smugglers, more than anything. I doubt they have much more than they can offer us, Marcus grumbled.
Shame. Here I thought they were threatening us or something. It would have given us some publicity to give the Iluiano family down. But Marcus, you're forgetting something very important. The Iluiano are giving us something very valuable. Credit. You said yourself. We'd get publicity by stamping them out, because Iluiano are a prominent family with roots in the city. If the Iluiano family want to forge an alliance with us, though, it can only make us look better.
So you're going to their meeting?
It's tomorrow night. A dinner meeting. Keep things prim and proper for me while I'm gone, won't you?
What about security?
Only 2 gunmen. I don't want to appear as an invading party. But Marcus, this could be the start of something fantastic.
The Iluiano family mansion was in fact just that, a massive mansion.
It was practically dwarfing Oichi's own mansion, and it was incredible, rustic and elaborately beautiful. For Oichi, who had grown up around the eastern beauty of Japanese gardens and aesthetic, this was a beautiful example of early American architecture that appealed to her inner artist. The vines that snaked their way along the border walls and the inner fountain that led up to the mansion were inviting and incredibly showy of the value and power of the family that owned it. This was the Ulano estate. Oichi was hardly able to contain her excitement as she got out of her car and walked to the gate. She was dressed in a classy dress with a coat over it and pearl necklace, and as she got to the gate, 2 other young men carrying sidearms walked out beside her, both dressed in business casual attire. They would not sit in for the meal, but they would be decent security. There was an older man at the gate who looked like he was likely in his 80s. He couldn't be the head of the family. No, the way he gave polite bows and opened the gate made it seem he was a servant or underling. Oichi smiled and waved at him as she walked inside.
My name is Hector Iluano. I'm uncle to Horatio Iluano, the head of the family.
The uncle is meant to come and greet the guests.
It's not a mark of disrespect, I assure you. My nephew would have come to meet you himself, but he's currently on the phone and couldn't come, he explained.
Oichi followed Hector to the large double doors leading into the manor.
I'm told you love spaghetti.
How could you possibly know that?
I have very reliable sources, Miss Tiger. Unfortunately, for dinner this evening, we are to have a traditional salmon dish, which is a staple of the Ulano family. That said, we are more than happy to make something else, if you'd rather.
No, that's all right. Oichi felt herself stiffen a little. How do these people know her favorite food? And why were they making such high-class meals for her when they barely knew her? Things weren't adding up, and Oichi quickly started building up her defenses. She walked to the dining room and was enamored by the massive dining table set with plates of finest china and shimmering silverware. 4 tall windows lined the long wall beside the table, letting in the fading sun. The chandelier above the table was glittering with crystal and real candles burning away at the top. And sitting at the far end of the table was a man in his 60s. He had black hair balding near the top and a thick mustache. There was a familiar look about him that Oichi couldn't quite place. He glanced up and smiled, and it was not threatening. It wasn't even challenging. Oichi had become used to confronting opposing gang leaders with false modesty, hostility, or even threats, but here, he looked genuinely open to her. He even stood up and gave a bow.
Miss Oichi Tiger, it is a pleasure to have you in my home. Thank you so much for coming, and I apologize for the abruptness of this meeting, but I'm afraid I couldn't wait.
Wait for what? Oichi asked, reaching out her hand to shake it. Horatio shook his head at the hand and then walked toward and embraced Oichi in a hug. Oichi let out a cry of surprise as the man hugged her tightly, and the 2 gunmen behind her pulled their pistols fast.
Whoa! I'm so sorry. I meant no offense. Horatio laughed, stepping back. Please, take a seat. I'd simply waited so anxiously to finally meet you.
You usually hug your business associates? Oichi asked, taken aback and finally taking a seat at the other end of the table.
Business Miss Tiger, by the time we're done, you and I will be practically family.
He looked to his watch and frowned.
But where is he?
He?
I was expecting him to be here. I called him and he said he was coming.
Horatio fumbled about as if searching for his cell phone.
Oh, God, cursed contraption. I miss when we just used simple house phones. Always knew where they were, and...
Mr. Iluano, Oichi interrupted, I should go ahead and make this clear. This is not how I usually conduct business. If you want to forge a business arrangement or alliance, let's start the discussion before eating so that we can think over the details.
Think of... Oichi, dear, there will be plenty of time to sort out those things later. For now, we need to discuss far more important things. There's an order to these things, of course. Will you want to invite your family here?
My family? What on earth are you...
Obviously, they'd want to be present for the ceremony, and I'd be happy to pay for the plane tickets. It wouldn't be too much of a...
I've had enough, Oichi snapped, now rising to her feet, her eyes flashing. Are you demented? What are you going on about?
I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong, Miss Tiger?
What you're saying doesn't make any sense, Oichi cried. I don't understand what you're...
Sorry I'm late, Dad. The voice froze Oichi's blood cold.
To the doors to the dining room walked the one man she didn't want to see now. The one man who couldn't see her making business deals with mafia bosses. He was wearing a white button-down shirt and black pleated pants with nice shoes on, and he looked a little out of breath from rushing. His eyes had caught hers, and Todd was now staring at Oichi with complete confusion. Oichi? He asked. Todd? She gasped. Todd turned his eyes to Horatio in shock.
Dad, what's going on here?
Dad? Oichi squealed, nearly sinking back into her chair in horror.
Horatio nodded and beamed brightly, standing and walking
to his apparent son, Todd, clapping him on the back.
I was worried for a while, I admit. Todd never appreciated the family business. Had too much of the law in his blood, I guess, though. I've never known where he got it from. Went to the academy, changed his damn name, the whole 9 yards. So when he calls me up saying he's dating the infamous Oichi Taiga, you can imagine just how happy that made me as his father. Finally coming back and around to the roots, lad. So I figured we could all sit down and talk about our futures as Oichi Taiga. Oichi, you're... Todd's eyes were now sinking into a dark place, a place that Oichi's heart couldn't reach him. Todd, you're head of the Tiger Syndicate. Aren't you? He asked. Horatio looked confused a moment and crossed his arms. Don't joke around, boy. Surely you know when you started dating her. You had to have known who she... Todd's face twisted from surprise to horror. It slowly became rage. Horatio caught this and his own face sank in defeat. I assumed you knew. Didn't you? I just lost my appetite. Todd snarled, storming out of the room. Todd, wait! Oichi cried, chasing after him. Horatio didn't bother to stop her as she ran out after him. The 2 gunmen by the door saw the 2 running and were too confused to know whether to pursue or not, so they went back to standing at attention, not bothering to interfere. Todd, please talk to me, Oichi cried, grabbing his sleeve. Todd swung his arm free. Talk to you? Who the hell are you? He snapped. Are you the same girl I met on the street, or are you some bloodthirsty Yakuza bitch? She could take that insult from any man, but not from Todd. Todd, it's not like that. I'm not... It's not like I'm one or the other. I'm still the same woman. You've lied to me. Lied to me from day one, Todd screamed. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a fool. How could I not have seen you for what you are? I didn't know you were with the Ilano family. You can't choose your family, Todd sneered. I never wanted anything to do with Dad's business. I left for the police academy when I was old enough. I changed my name, turned my life around. I didn't want any part of this life. But I still love my dad. Of course I told him about you and that I was in love with you. And I guess he thought I'd actually come back around to this bullshit. You dragged me back into it. Fuck, you used me. You toyed with me. I would never do that to you, Todd, Oichi pleaded, grabbing his hand and holding it to her chest so that he could feel her heart pounding. I never meant to toy with you. I never meant for this. But you lied to me. You've been running a criminal empire and you just used the poor dumb cop. Of course you did. Must have been easy for you to get inside details on the cop's movements from me. Is that what it was about? Of course it wasn't, Oichi screamed. She didn't have the heart to tell him that she had indeed taken advantage of his position from time to time. But the truth was still more than that. Todd, when I was with you, I felt like I was a woman, not a tigress, not a mob boss, a woman. Please believe me. I love you, Todd. Don't say that to me. Todd snapped. Don't you dare say that to me. Not now. Not after this. He pulled his hand away from her, and Oichi could see tears bringing forth in his eyes. Tears of humiliation, tears of pain and betrayal. He felt used, stabbed in the back. And honestly, Oichi couldn't blame him. I should arrest you. I should turn you in now and break apart your whole world, Todd hissed. I should slap a pair of cuffs on you and be done with this whole fucked up game of yours. Oichi stood stock still a moment. The Yakuza side of her, the Tiger side, wanted to strike him down, yank the pistol from her waist and shoot him before he could take her in. But another side of her was in charge now. The woman side of her was holding onto her hands, and then she held them out to him, waiting for the cuffs. If that's what you want, Todd, please turn me in. I won't fight back. Todd stared at her and bit his lip, tears racing down his face as he slapped her hands away. Don't look at me like that! You're not the girl I knew. God damn it all, why'd it have to be you? Why'd you have to be her? He stood there shaking with shame and pain. He was choking through sobs and finally managed to speak. I have to know. Was it real? Was any of what we had real? Or was it all just a lie? Oichi was choking on her own tears, fighting back her fear and the slowly creeping isolation slipping into her heart. You won't believe me, but I swear to you on my life and on my family, I loved you from the moment I met you, she finally confessed. I hoped you'd never learn this truth about me, and I was naive to think you never would. It's not because I thought you were stupid, Todd. It's because I thought I was too clever. It's my fault. This is all my fault, Todd. And that, Todd answered, may be the first thing I truly believe, Todd sobbed. This is your fault, Oichi Taiga, tigress of Major City.
Todd turned on his heels and stormed to the doors. As he grabbed the door handle, he paused and looked back at her through red, puffy eyes full of remorseful tears. I can't turn you in. I can't, because even if all you did was use me, I loved you. What I had was real. So I can't arrest you, but we're done. Oichi Taiga, never let me see your face again. Never! He then slammed the door, shattering Oichi's heart like glass. She fell to her knees there in the front hall of the mansion, bawling into her hands. The woman had died, and the tigress remained. But even now, that tigress was in mourning. From the other door, Horatio Iliano was tearing up as well as he lifted his wineglass to his lips, lamenting the terrible mistake he'd made. How horrible it was to lose a son's trust and a future daughter in a single instant. And that was chapter 16. All right, chapter 17. Three weeks since the splitting of Oichi and Todd had done nothing to heal the pain in Oichi's heart. She spent most of her time in her manor, laying in bed or walking about in a near stupor. It was as if all the life, energy, and fire had left her. She was angry, furious at herself for letting her emotions become so easily compromised and allowing herself to be taken in by matters of romance when they had nothing to do with her plans. Yet, she was also... Sorry, I lost my place. Yet she was also beyond disappointed in her failure to prepare for this. She should have told him. She should have come up with some excuse or lie. But even the thought of lying to Todd further, especially when the truth was so apparent, was near inconceivable. She couldn't bring herself to do it again, or even consider it. There were moments she felt the urge to pick up her phone and call him, to apologize, reach out once more to the one she'd given her life and time to, but she never did, and she felt fearful that she never would. As she sat alone that afternoon in her kitchen, having cooked a delicious dinner for herself, she picked at her food like a child who didn't want to eat her broccoli. There was no feeling in it. Cooking was one of the many things she did that she enjoyed. It cheered her up when she was down and made her feel in control, but now it felt like it lacked allure or luster. Even looking at the fruits of her labors felt a little unsavory. Her cell phone sat beside her under the false delusion that it would ring with Todd's name on it. Him expressing how much he missed her and loved her, how they would run away together and forget this ever happened. But these childlike fantasies were nothing but that. Mere fantasies. Still, there it sat, waiting for the call that would never come. Her syndicate family continued to run itself like a well-oiled machine, and every few hours she'd get a call from Marcus or one of her other lieutenants wanting to check in on her or ask her advice for something. She'd mostly regained her losses after the betrayal weeks ago, and yet these things could not fill the pain in her chest and in her mind. When her phone finally did ring, she didn't even wait for the second ring. Like an instinct, she snapped up her phone instantly to check the caller ID, praying, hoping. But no, it was only Marcus. Clicking the answer button, she put the phone on speaker. "I'm fine, Marcus," she lied, already guessing what he was calling about. "Ma'am, we have a situation down here, and it's critical," Marcus hissed through the receiver. Surprised by his whisper, Oichi turned her glance to the phone expectantly. "What's going on?" "It's better that you come and see for yourself, ma'am." "How soon can you get to the Setting Sun convenience store? It's on the corner." "I know where it is, Marcus," Oichi replied sharply, her depression starting to inch away as she knew the street that the store was on. It wasn't far from the red zone area where she'd been monitoring the youth center. "Was it vandalized?" "Worse. There's been a murder," Marcus replied. "You need to come down here. Now." Oichi didn't wait a moment longer. She didn't even put her food in the fridge before grabbing her coat and walking quickly out the door to the car. Possibilities and mental images of the scene were already dancing in her head. She knew that the possibility of what those bastards were capable of and what they'd likely been willing to do to get to this point came across. And worse yet, the Setting Sun store was a pretty well-liked small business that had been rather hospitable and even kind to any of the syndicate enforcers that dropped by. Was that why they were hit? Had they been targeted for their kindness to Oichi and her organization? She had to know. And when she did, there was no telling what next steps to take. 30 minutes of driving, and Oichi finally came to the scene of the murder. There were police lines set up around the store, but no cop cars anywhere to be seen. In fact, there wasn't even much of a crowd, just people walking around and whispering to each other. Oichi marched to the police tape where Marcus was waiting. He was on his phone when she arrived, but seeing her got him to put it away quickly.
Good, you made it.
The police have the body?
Yeah, but one of our boys was in the store when it happened and managed to get a few pictures on his phone.
What was his name?
Zachary. A good kid.
Show me what he got. If it's any good, I'll make it worth his while for getting the evidence. Marcus handed over his phone so Oichi could see.
Doesn't really matter that much, does it? The police are still going to handle this with kid gloves, no matter what evidence we may bring.
They don't want
to upset the community.
The community is already pretty damn upset, Marcus, Oichi replied, looking at the images. As ghastly as Oichi expected them to be, she was relieved that it wasn't as gruesome as she'd expected, though it wasn't a pretty series of pictures either. From what she gathered from them, there were at least 2 males with faces covered. One had a handgun and a backpack on. The other had a baseball bat in his hands. One of the pictures showed the baseball bat being taken to a glass case of candy and another to the cash register. They weren't worried about money. The body in the picture was of the 48-year-old woman who worked in the shop with her husband. She had 2 gunshot wounds in her head, and the pictures ended there.
After he got those pics, the killers chased everyone out of the store, Marcus explained.
The 2 men have masks on. How can we be sure that this is youth center related?
Go back to the 3rd picture. One of them takes off his mask and you see his face. He's a regular visitor to the youth center, Marcus explained, flipping the picture back to show Oichi, who glared at the boy's black-haired visage and his cold brown eyes as he was laughing heartily, as if listening to a funny joke. You could have texted these to me. Why drag me here? Oichi asked. Because of what the pictures didn't show. Marcus stepped under the tape and motioned for Oichi to follow. She did so and tailed Marcus into the store to see the inside. There was a spot where the woman's body had been, but there was more to it. The room was spray-painted red with long streaks, and there was writing on the wall, some vague threats and random profanity, a few Quran verses. But what drew Oichi's eye the most was on the ground above where the body lay, painted in the same red spray paint were the words, "Traitors will pay in blood."
This was personal, wasn't it, Marcus? Oichi hissed.
They likely hit the store because they did business with us. They made an example out of them, and now it'll be harder to maintain a presence here, Marcus replied. The 2 who owned the shop were Mr. and Mrs. Talib. They were both good people, boss.
Boss? Marcus looked at Oichi, and his heart stopped beating. Something was burning in Oichi's eyes, a determination and madness he'd never seen before. She looked positively bloodthirsty, and her teeth were grit in a furious rage. Her eyes flashed with hellfire, and her eyes turned to Marcus, who inched away a few paces.
Get me a team of 20 guns, she snapped.
Boss, we can't start a firefight in the middle of town. We'll lose the trust of the people entirely and put people in...
I didn't ask for an opinion, Marcus. I said get me 20 of our boys who can carry guns and who don't question what I say. Have them meet tonight at our safe house in town and tell them to leave their morals at home.
She turned and stormed out of the convenience store, a rage etching its way onto her face. Boss, what are you going to do?
I'm going to keep my promise to that bastard, Oichi growled. I'm going to burn his world to the ground and scatter his ashes to the wind.
The night was cold, and the Faithful Haven Youth Center was alive and bustling with lights on it, almost all the windows. 5 large vans drove up to the parking lot, and out of them jumped 20 men, all wearing 3-piece suits and black ties. As they walked out, they all pulled out a silencer pistol and aimed up at the nearby street lamps, taking careful shots at each one to deaden the lights. While he worked, the others got to their own task. Out of the backs of the vans, they pulled large red tankers and carried them to the sides of the building, while others pulled out cases of bourbon and alcohol bottles, stuffing the tops with rags and swishing around the fluids to soak the cloth in rag. Oichi climbed out of her own car that had pulled in behind them, and Marcus walked beside her, frightened as not once had Oichi changed her expression from a cold and calculated hatred.
Surround the building and douse the doors and windows, she ordered.
Her crew ran to their stations, pouring smelly diesel fuel around the windows and doors of the center. Once they finished this, they retreated to a safe distance, while the other 11 or 12 men started lighting the newly made cocktails in their hands. Oichi stood in the center of this mob of men and looked at the youth center as one glares at a large cockroach. Miss Taiga, I am begging you to think about what you're about to do, Marcus pleaded.
Our information tells us even though the youth center is closed at this hour, several young men with past offenses seem to congregate here at this time. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, but...
So it's safe to assume that they're planning their next moves now. Yes? Oichi barked.
That is
a possibility, Miss Taiga. Then I'm settling this now, Marcus. Miss Taiga, I think you're going too far. A woman is dead, Marcus. She died doing business with us. But Marcus, if you don't have the stomach for this, then go home. But I'm going to remind this city who I am, and I will purge this rat's nest. And what will you do when the community becomes terrified of you? And that's their choice to make, Oichi replied. And now I'm making mine. She snarled and looked at the men standing around. Light it up. They chucked the cocktails with accurate hurls at the windows and doors of the building. The diesel fuel caught light almost instantly, and the walls were soon engulfed in flames. A few others ignited new cocktails and began throwing them at as well, while others went back to the van and picked up their last surprise package. They were carrying AK-47s and other AK weaponry and were loading up the magazines, standing in a firing line behind the inferno that was once a youth center. A few moments later, the screams were coming, shouts and cries of panic as the few residents inside started to realize what was happening. Several attempted to run for the windows, but were met by fire. A few dared to race out the door and dash through the flames, only to be stopped in their tracks by heavy machine gun fire. And standing in the middle of the firing line was Oichi, glaring daggers as the corpses began to mount. Fire danced in her eyes as the evening wind kicked up, fanning the fire that climbed ever higher, and the hair that blew with Oichi. Her eyes flashed with a vengeful rage and even a grim satisfaction as for once things were turning her way. Stop! Please stop! Out of the door, screaming with severe burns on his face and hands, was the wild-eyed and panic-stricken Habaza. He saw Oichi and her firing squad ahead of him and staggered out to them, yammering wildly and barely coherent. Miss Taiga, I am sorry. Forgive us. We were wrong to kill her. We'll stop. I swear we'll stop. Just please. There was one gunshot. Habaza's pleas and cries stopped in an instant as a single bullet went through his forehead. Oichi had pulled her pistol the moment she saw him. She had no interest in words with him, no interest in discussing the matter or gloating over the fallen shit stain at her feet. Only retribution and rage filled her heart. She lowered her gun again and then gazed at the fire. I'm a woman of my word, she finally hissed, walking away. Clean up the rest, boys. Anyone comes out, kill them. See that the fire doesn't spread past the building, and then go home. Her men all nodded their agreement and got about their jobs to control the fire. As she walked to her car, Marcus stood there, fuming, looking positively horror-stricken by her savagery. Have a good evening, she said calmly to him, not meeting his gaze. I won't sleep a wink, and you know that, he snapped. I'll be going out of town for a few days until this all blows over, Oichi sighed. I think some time with my thoughts will be good for me. You can handle the day-to-day affairs on your own, I think. Miss Taiga, this is mass murder. This is wrong, and you know it. How could you do this? Marcus blasted, finally losing his composure. Oichi paused and glanced at him. Is this your resignation from the family? She asked. No, Marcus corrected. No, I still respect you and everything you're trying to do, but it's just that... Pity, she answered, moving to her car. You're a good man, Marcus. You should get out of this life while you still can before it turns you into something ugly. As for me, I think it's far too late for that, and you know it. I'm a demon, Marcus. And if that's what it takes to save this shitty town, then so be it. That's what I'll have to be. Without another word from either of them, the tigress, or maybe the demon of New Mercia, drove off into the night beyond the warm and haunting light of a fire that it had started. With the fire growing ever higher and more fierce, the city was given an ironically cold reminder of who ran the underworld of New Mercia and just what she was capable of when she was crossed. And that was chapter 17. So before we go on, I warned you guys that some of these chapters would be a little darker for context so that you know what was being referenced here. Like I said, everything that happens in this story is referential to Oda Nobunaga, right? So here's essentially what is going on. In 1571, Oda Nobunaga was on the back foot. He had gone 11 years sieging the Iko-Uki warrior monks of Ishiyama Honganji. and things were just becoming more and more difficult. His enemies, the Azai and the Asakura, were returning to cause him more trouble, and he was furious at these developments. So he finally made a truce with the Azai and the Asakura and turned his attention to the warrior monks of Mount Hiei. And with a great deal of anger and frustration, Oda surrounded the bottom of the mountain and lit it all on fire. The fire roared up the mountain to the monastery at the top, and when the monks and civilians living there attempted to flee down the mountain, Oda gave the order to slaughter anyone trying to get out. It was this act that earned Oda Nobunaga the title of the Demon King of Japan. So that's exactly what I was trying to reference here. Oda Nobunaga burning Mount Hiei. So you got to understand, that was what I was going for. So if anyone's like, oh, this is very hateful, this is evil, like, understand, I am referencing a historical incident with this. So, now that we're done with that, let's move on to chapter 18, if anyone's still interested in listening. Did Oda regret it afterwards? We don't know. If I had to guess, probably not. To him, they were enemies and insurgents, and as far as he was concerned, getting rid of them was a necessity. So I doubt that he cared all that much, but we don't know for sure. All right. Chapter 18. To New Mercia... Sorry. There we go. To say New Mercia was shaken was an understatement. Even a month after the infamous massacre at the youth center, the seeding communities that made it up were reeling. Feelings were mixed about the Tigress of the Taiga Syndicate. Some saw her as a hero who finally put an end to the out-of-control looters and vandals within the community. But others saw her as a reckless and murderous sociopath. But for the NMPD, it wasn't up for debate how they interpreted the Tigress. All that mattered was that she was brought to justice. The only problem was that she was nowhere to be found. After the events of the arson and massacre, Oichi Taiga had vanished. The police had no leads on her movements, and her operation seemed to run as smoothly and efficiently as ever. And this was unnerving, to say the least. The commissioner, who had received emails and calls concerning the whereabouts and activities of the Taiga Syndicate, was now beside himself and was ordering all hands to double their efforts to uncover the identity of the Tigress and to bring her in. But Todd had told no one. Things were picking up quickly for Todd. With the rise in gang activity, several witnesses had been pulled to begin testifying against local drug lords and gang affiliates. And now Todd found himself in a safe house just outside of town as one of the beat cops who'd been assigned security. The witness's name was Daryl Kingston, the owner of a small bowling alley where a few of the Timberwolf triads would hold private meetings. He'd offered information on the triads and their dealings in exchange for protection. Considering some of the things he'd seen, he probably knew a great deal, which was good because his testimony would be instrumental in putting away Shin Wong, a leader of the triad and former hitman. Daryl claimed he'd seen Wong butcher 2 people outside of his bowling alley a month ago, so he couldn't stay quiet about it anymore. It was 2 days until Daryl would appear in court, so for now the police would sit on the safe house. Todd heard Daryl in the bathroom having an upset stomach from nerves. He didn't care about that. He was just staring out the window, thinking about Oichi. "Hey, you all right?" Todd glanced up to see Detective Brown glancing down at him. Detective Brown was the one in charge of this investigation and tasked with the protection of Daryl Kingston. He was a good man and a good cop, if a bit too laid back at times. "Yeah, I'm fine, Detective. You haven't been yourself lately. Your partner says you just stare off into space sometimes." "I've had a lot on my mind," Todd answered calmly. "Things not work out between you and your lady friend?" he asked. It was no secret that Todd had been dating Oichi, but he never divulged who she really was. He'd come close several times to marching into the chief's office and telling him exactly who Oichi Taiga was, but he always stopped short. He couldn't explain why, but it never sat well with him to tell the chief. It felt like betrayal. What an ironic statement. We went our separate ways. Just couldn't work out. From 2 different worlds and all that. "Well, plenty of fish in the sea," Detective Brown chuckled. "Still, based on the picture you shared, that fish was a shark." "You don't know the half of it." "Anyway, did you hear the news about 1PP? Brown asked. Todd glanced back at the detective, confused. "No, what's up?" "Well, supposedly there were spray-painted messages in the building this morning, left in red paint." "Who left it?" "We think the Timberwolves," Brown answered gruffly. "Probably trying to ruffle our feathers or something." "What's the commissioner say about it?" "Hasn't said anything. Just a lot of hot air being blown around." Brown shrugged. "You know the triad. They start off being the second best in the city, then the Leviathans are weakened, so they're all set to take over, and now this Taiga group appears and steals their thunder. They got a reputation to uphold, and if a whistleblower sells out their own, well, that'd just be a sucker punch, wouldn't it?" "Yeah, so Maybe we should take the threat more seriously, Todd offered. Brown shrugged. Are you kidding? They don't know our location, Brown replied. That wasn't much of a comfort. The triads had means of getting information. I think we should relocate to a different safe house. There's too much of a chance that we... Todd stopped a moment as he heard the sound of motors in the distance. He hurried to the window and glanced outside as a small group of motorcycles and vans drove up towards the house, forming a semicircle just at the end of the driveway. The safe house wasn't in the thick of the city, more in the suburbs, but it was still easy to box in the pathway out of the house. As men on the cycles began getting off and grabbing handguns out of their holsters, Todd backed away from the window fast, fear gripping his lungs, making it hard to breathe. Brown and a few of the other officers in the room looked outside, and the same horror hit them. Out the back! We need to get out of the back of the house! Brown instructed, going to grab a near-petrified Kingston. No! Another officer, Officer Winston, hissed. They'll just mow us down! As we make our way down, they'll see us! He was right, of course, and Todd knew better than to argue the point, but there seemed no other alternative. He had to think of something, anything they could do. Try looking around for something to barricade the doors and windows with, Todd shouted. All men ran to their positions, searching and scraping around for wood or chairs to slam against the door. Detective Brown ran to a hatch, which he opened to find a basement. Darryl, come here! He hollered, bringing the trembling witness to the door. Hide in the basement until this all blows over. As he helped him down the stairs, Todd's eyes caught a box near the bottom of the stairs marked with yellow and red. Detective, could you pull out those boxes? He asked. They ain't heavy enough to board the doors. Just do it, Todd asked urgently. And without arguing, he tossed up the box for Todd. Guys, they're unloading the van. There are a lot more of them out there now, one officer shouted, pulling his farm. What the fuck do we do? Guys, I have an idea, Todd whispered, smiling as he began unloading the contents of the box. Andrew Pan walked 5 paces towards the safe house. He was thankful for their mole and the police who fed them this information and wanted this over with as quickly as possible. One of his fellow triad handed him a megaphone, and he clicked it with a loud screech from the audio receiver. Little pigs, can we come in? He shouted. You got someone we want, and we need to do him in. The other wolves chuckled at his poetic demands. Suddenly another voice was heard shouting back, Not by the hair of our chinny chin chin. A little frustrated, Andrew lifted up the megaphone again. It doesn't have to end bloody, friend. Just let us have Kingston and we won't hurt anyone else. You're not the cops we want dead. So you want some of us dead, the voice shouted back. Listen, we can't just hand over a witness like that, but maybe we can reach some kind of agreement. Here's your agreement, Andrew snapped. In exactly 30 seconds, we're going to march into that house and kill everyone we find inside. And the only thing you can do to stop us is hand over Kingston. We've got you outnumbered and outgunned. The wolves around him all began loading their guns as if to demonstrate the point. But the response was calm and cocky. Are you sure about that? We're armed to the teeth in here, and if you so much as take 5 more steps, we'll put more holes in you than the spokes of your bicycle wheels. To this, there was an air of concern that rippled through the wolves. You bluffing cop! I never bluff. I should also inform you that I have connections with the Iliano Mafia family and the Taiga Syndicate. This sent a ripple of fear through everyone by their bikes. Iliano were an old and respected mafia family with deep ties to the city's underground. Though not as active as before, they still held a strong presence and rapport. But the Taiga, this was something worth being worried about. Not a joke, right? What would a cop be doing working with 2 crime families? Andrew asked. Let's not joke around, friend, the voice responded coldly. You found our safe house somehow, and that probably involved a dirty cop. Cops working with gangsters like you is nothing new. If this threat was real, then the wolves had to tread carefully. But at the same time, their reputation was on the line. My offer still stands, pig. Even if you do know the Iliano and the Taiga, you have someone we want. Hand him over. 1 step closer and we kill every one of you. The voice shouted back this warning. Andrew dared to take the risk that this was all just a bluff, and he took a step forward. Pow! Andrew cried out as he felt the burning pain of a bullet passing his shoulder. He fell back in agony, but before he could give the order to return fire, suddenly the windows of the house exploded with shots. Get back! Get back! Andrew shouted as the sound of gunfire tore through the house. He hadn't been bluffing. They were armed and dangerous, and every cop in that house was firing at them. The wolves retreated behind their bikes and the large van for cover and began returning fire, shooting wildly and furiously, trying to get off any shot they could. But the gunshots from the house just kept coming. Gunshots returned for nearly 10 minutes before suddenly Andrew noticed something odd. None of the gunshots that were firing seemed to be hitting the van or cycles. Hold fire! Stop shooting, you assholes! He roared. After a few moments, all the wolves stopped, only to notice no more gunshots were coming from the house. A realization began to dawn on him, one he was blushing already thinking about. With a hiss of rage, he ran up to the house, expecting any moment for another volley to hit him, but when none did, he kicked the door open as smoke billowed out. It was like someone had hit a fire just past the door, and now only smoke filled the house. Andrew stormed in and looked around, hoping to see wounded and dead cops, but instead the house was empty. As more and more wolves came in, covering their mouths and noses from the smoke, they investigated the house, and when Andrew began to notice tattered red paper on the floor and walls, he began to realize what had happened. "Hey, boss, look." One of the wolves found a box. "Firecrackers." "That son of a bitch!" Andrew ran to the back of the house and looked out the window, hoping to see where the cops and Kingston had gone, but saw no one. They'd escaped while setting off the fireworks as a bluff. "That was some quick thinking, Todd." Brown laughed as they hurried down the sidewalk across the other block. Darrell was breathing a little easier, and all the cops were chuckling amongst themselves about the cleverness of the trick. Todd didn't have time to feel relieved, though. While the others had strung up firecrackers by the windows and doors of the house, he'd had to buy some time, and in doing so, he'd mentioned his affiliation with the Taiga and his own father. Would the wolves make that connection and figure out who he was? And if they did, would they use that against him? He'd won the battle, but this war was getting worse, and the wolves wouldn't take this insult lying down. He knew that he needed help, and the thought of who he needed to call made him sick to his stomach. Who else to handle a wolf, if not a tigress? And that was chapter 18. And this, too, has historical connections, believe it or not. See, while Oda Nobunaga was busy with his campaign in Tokyo, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who I based Todd off of, had his own issues. Takeda Shingen, one of the great daimyo of Japan at the time, and the creator of the Japanese cavalry charge, was marching his way through Tokugawa territory to get to Kyoto, right? So Tokugawa mustered a force to stop him, but failed and retreated to his fortress. When the Takeda arrived to destroy him, he pulled this legendary bluff. He threw open the doors and challenged Shingen and his forces to come and take him. Now, the Takeda forces were frightened that he was hiding more soldiers in there, and they were afraid to ambush him, so they retreated, allowing Tokugawa his life and victory, all thanks to a very clever bluff and misdirection. So literally what we have here is a retelling of that. Just like Tokugawa threw open the doors and made a bluff against Shingen and fooled them, Todd here made a very similar bluff, making them think that there were a ton of cops inside the house ready to take them using firecrackers, and by the time that the Timberwolf Triad found out, they were already long gone. So that is the inspiration for chapter 17. Well, that was chapter 18, sorry, but moving on. All right, we are on chapter 19. Probably the last one we'll read tonight. Chapter 19. Whew. Okay, here we go. One second. All right. Chapter 19, here we go. War was on the horizon, and the city could feel it. The police had begun twice as active in the few weeks following the Safe House attack, if for no other reason than their own security. The Timberwolves were furious at having been tricked, and their boss, Donnie Chin, was swearing that he'd find the cop who made the bluff and bleed him like the pig he was. Police Chief Bolton had told Todd explicitly to stay low for a few days until things blew over, but that hadn't stopped the wolves from harassing officers, vandalizing empty cop cars, and on a few occasions throwing Molotov cocktails into rolled-down windows of police cars to burn and injure the police inside. With each arrest of a wolf, another 2 cops were attacked. Todd sat in the precinct, grumbling darkly as the bustling and chattering cops around him moved about in a haste. Everyone knew that something would happen soon, but no one was sure what. Todd didn't like sitting around, but he'd been able to simply stay around a desk for a while, and some of the officers in the precinct seemed to blame him for their troubles. His dad had texted him a few times, asking if he was okay and if he needed any help, but Todd had ignored these offers. He knew the help his father would give, and he'd sworn not to go back to his dad for that life, especially considering his dad's mafia family didn't have the muscle it used to have, just the influence. But influence wouldn't do any good here. Not when Chin was out for blood and the wolves were literally howling for revenge. Edwards. Todd heard the call and almost forgot that what his last name was. He'd gotten so caught up in his old family he'd forgotten for the briefest of moments that it wasn't his anymore. He stood up to the call and saw Chief Bolton by the door waving for him. "I need to see you for a second." Todd nodded and walked to his office as he opened the door for him. Walking inside felt a lot like being called into an administrator's room or a grade school. You knew you were in trouble, but you weren't sure where to start to try and get out of it. Frankly, though, that didn't matter much to Todd. Right now, he just needed answers and a clear direction to start working. When the door closed behind the chief, Todd clenched his fists a little, expecting a yelling or some kind of raised voice, but instead, all he heard was a sigh.
"Doing all right, Edwards?"
He asked, clearly trying to sound civil and not panicked, and it certainly wasn't working. "Been better," Todd answered questioningly. Bolt just rubbed his chin in frustration before letting out a groan of anger.
"Look, I'm going to cut to the chase. We are in deep shit, Todd," he grumbled.
The wolves haven't hit us, have they?" Todd asked urgently.
"No, but it's like waiting for a bomb to go off. Everyone knows it's just a matter of time. I mean, it's absolute panic out there," Bolton snapped, indicating the terrified police officers. "It's nothing but nerves and jitters for the last few days. I can't do anything with this."
"I'm sorry, sir," Todd answered politely, feeling a twang of guilt for the sense of dread washing over everyone.
"You did your job. And frankly, that's all I can ask of anyone from around here," the chief shrugged. "But that's not what I need to talk to you about. I read your report about the safe house incident, and there are two major points of contention we need to discuss."
Chief Bolton reached under his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder.
"Firstly, you mentioned your suspicions about a dirty cop feeding information to the wolves."
"Yeah, I did say that. I think that's how they found the safe house."
"We dug on that lead and didn't find anything out of the ordinary in the chain of information from this precinct."
Chief Bolton paused a moment as if building to a greater point, and Todd raised his eyebrow.
But we did find something disturbing in the DA. One of the yahoos in the DA's office hasn't reported to work in the last few days, and after digging a little on her, turns out she has cousins in the wolf triad.
"So let's go question her."
"Sit down, Edwards," Chief Bolton growled, clearly not done. "That's not the problem. The problem is that we started investigating the police force before the DA, which means there's no telling how much that bitch could feed the wolves before she had to make herself scarce. And since you were part of the safe house operation, she'll have your name, which means the wolves will know who you are."
Todd started to appreciate the depths of this river of shit he was in and realized he was close to drowning. Bolton wasn't done, though, as he then opened the file and pointed to the top page. It had Todd's face on it. This was his personnel file.
"The second problem we have, Edwards, is that what you reportedly said to the wolves to buy time for your escape, you said you had ties to the Iliano crime family and the Taiga Syndicate."
He leaned forward so Todd could take in the dark undertone of a disturbing frustration in its face.
"Look, I know who your father is, so I know exactly what you meant by that first remark. But what the hell do you know about the Taiga Syndicate?"
"Not much, frankly," Todd growled, trying hard to keep a poker face and losing terribly. It was all he could do not to blurt out Oichi's name. "I had dinner with my dad not long ago, and he told me some stuff about them. I was hoping using the Taiga's family name would scare the wolves into hesitating."
"So you were bluffing? Well, that's a good thing, Edwards."
Which by the tone of his voice showed that it definitely was not a good thing, and that he likely didn't believe a word of what Todd had said.
"Because the wolves are every bit as organized and dangerous as the Taiga are, and if the Taiga family find out that you have dirt on them, the wolves won't be the only ones pounding on your door."
This thought had not occurred to Todd, but he hardly felt the need to be worried. Oichi was aware of how much Todd knew and didn't know. She wouldn't want to hurt him or the police. She wasn't that kind of person and never had been. A small part of him felt a rush of nostalgia as he pictured her smiling face, but he chased that thought from his mind quickly. That smiling girl wasn't Oichi. Oichi was something different entirely.
"In any case, Edwards, if there's anything you know about the Taiga, it's time to come clean," Bolton hissed. "I'm not real interested in making your life more difficult, but they've been a pain in the ass for long enough, and I think it's time to—"
All at once, the world suddenly went dark. There were shouts and curses all throughout the precinct as people bumped into each other and shouted as all the lights in the building all shut off. The computers and fans went dead. The power had been cut. Bolton rose to his feet and sweat began to permeate his face.
"Shit! It's starting!"
Todd didn't need to ask what he meant by that. The Triad were here, and they were going to start taking lives.
"We need to call the other precincts and get some backup now."
As Bolton ran out the door to start issuing orders, Todd knew it wouldn't be a matter if he did. The Triad had no intention of staying long. The Timberwolves would hit hard, burn the place, and try to get their hands on him. And then they'd pull out. The sound of shattering glass came from the sound of exploding fires as Molotovs were hurled through the windows to ignite the inside of the precinct. Police shouted and screamed as they rushed to put out the small fires. Todd ran to his desk to grab his sidearm, knowing he'd probably have to use it. Barricade the doors and windows and wait for the cavalry to arrive. As Bolton shouted these words, a sudden thought began to slink into Todd's head. It was something Bolton had said in his office. It was stupid, ungodly, and dementedly ridiculous to even consider, but the sounds of shouting outside was getting louder and more fires were starting as police rushed to put them out. As the police fought back fires and tried firing their sidearms from open windows, Todd snuck to the chief's room and closed the door behind him. With the light still out and only the soft glow of fires beyond the door to give him light, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he was certain would never pick up. Someone who would not want anything to do with him. All the same, he stood stock still and waited for a response. A voice. He waited for the ringing to stop and would hold his breath until it started again. After the fourth ring, he was certain it would go straight to answering machine. But it didn't. The line picked up, but it was dead quiet. No one spoke. No one breathed. The sound of shouting and screaming police and gangsters could be faintly heard as Todd gathered his thoughts. "I'm still furious with you," he started angrily, "and I haven't forgiven you. I don't know if I ever will. But right now, I am in deep shit, and I don't know what to do. The Triad is out for my blood, and they're going to burn down my police station to get to me. They know about who my dad is, and they know I'm familiar with your organization, so they're probably going to want to squeeze me for info, and I don't have it." He waited a moment for a response, but there was none, only silence. And he continued, "You'll do what you want. Criminals like you always do. I'm sure the last person you want to hear from, but..." He inhaled before finally speaking one last time. "Damn it, I need your help. I don't know or care how, but please. And then after that we can go back to never talking to each other again." He stopped and waited. The cold, empty line felt like agony to his ears, and he started to lower the phone to hang up. "How long do you think you have before they break through?" The voice was fast, worried, and unmistakably Oichi's. Todd didn't know if he was more happy to hear her voice or more happy that she seemed invested. 15 minutes, he answered. "We're trying to call for reinforcements, but it'll..." "Not for me. Buy as much time as you can. In 12 minutes, I'm going to make the Triad regret they ever knew your name." "Wait, what are you going to do?" Todd asked, sensing a frightening chill in Oichi's voice that sent a shiver down his back. "I'm going to do exactly what you said, Todd. I'm going to do what I want." And the line went dead, and Todd nearly dropped his phone. His hand was shaking. Her voice was not the one he'd expected, and it was not at all the cheerful, friendly creature he'd known. That was a tigress, a predator, and she was angry. He ran from the room and grabbed Bolton's arm as he was busy shouting orders and directions. "Chief!" Todd shouted. "What? Can you see where..." "Let me talk to them. Give me a megaphone so I can negotiate." "They don't want to negotiate, Edwards. They're gonna..." "I know!" Todd shouted. "But we need time. We still can't get a signal out for reinforcements. Radios are dead and the power's out. Nearest officers want to ride for another. Reinforcements are coming," Todd hissed, lowering his voice so only the chief could hear it. Over the bustle of returning fire, Bolton stared at Todd a long moment, and the look of dread mixed with awe in his glare was unmistakable. "What's going on, Edwards?" "We're about to get backup, and a lot of it. The Taiga are coming." And that was chapter 19. So, for the historical context, Takeda Katsuyori, who was the son of Takeda Shingen, he took over the clan after his father was killed. Now, as one of the great powerful clans of Japan, he wanted to make his strength known by taking the castle fortress of Nagashino, owned by Ieyasu. He was met with stiff resistance, but the castle is failing to hold the line, and soon it's going to be lost. So a single brave soldier managed to slip out of the castle and find Oda Nobunaga, who was away at the time. He tells Nobunaga of the attack, and he leads his armies to help counter the Takeda. However, the soldier knows that the castle will only hold for a little while longer, so he runs back to give the soldiers the good news and to encourage them to keep fighting. But he's caught midway there, and he's put up on a cross before his fellow soldiers. Now, the Takeda tell him that he will get to go free if he lies and says that Nobunaga is not coming. But instead, the man bellows to hold the line a little longer because Oda Nobunaga is coming. And he was killed for that. So that's what's going on here. And that was chapter 19. And that just leaves chapter 20 and 21.
I will offer you guys a choice. I can go ahead and read chapters 20 and 21 tonight and just close it out, or we can save them for next time and just make it a really short stream next Monday. Would you guys like me to just finish what I have? I will let you decide. Okay, we got one vote to finish it. Anyone else? Cynic says to finish it. Okay. Anyone else? All right, another vote. Okay, we got one saying save it. Here, I got an idea. Let's put it to a poll. Let's put it to a poll. That'll help. All right, there we go. I'll let you guys decide. Got 7 votes so far. 8 votes. If we get one more vote, I wonder if we can get 10 votes total. All right, I think we'll call it there. So it looks like the majority of you want me to finish reading tonight. All right, we will finish. Bear with me. All right, here we go. Chapter 20. Bear with me. Here we go. The streets were in a panic. Pedestrians fled the sidewalks and roads as 8 cars had now parked, blocking the streets and alleys around the precinct. A small army of men wearing grungy clothes were piling out of the vans and vehicles, carrying submachine guns and bottles of alcohol with rags stuffed in the mouth. A few were shouting in Chinese while others were lighting their cocktails to chuck through windows. One of them was bald, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and he had some degree of stubble on his chin. He was in charge of the operation. Donnie Chin himself, head of the Timberwolves Triad organization. He snarled up at the upper windows of the building, shouting a few things at his underlings, and all of them began working to launch their projectiles. "Chin!" a voice shouted from the 3rd-story window. He was holding a megaphone, and as Donnie looked up, he could see a man leaning out with a megaphone. "I'm the one you want, Chin! I'm Officer Todd Edwards!" Chin's eyes widened. He hadn't expected the target to show his face so quickly. Was he being heroic and sacrificing himself for his fellow officers, or was this another trap? He couldn't be sure. "Officer Edwards," Chin called up. "You're awful brave to stick your head out like this." "Come on, Chin," Todd shouted back. "We both know you aren't going to shoot me." "Oh, no? You said it yourself. You're going to bleed me like a stuck pig. Afraid killing me is out of the question just now." And Chin smirked. "So what are you proposing, officer? Are you willing to surrender yourself?"
That's certainly an option, Todd replied, but seems risky. Risky, Chen laughed. Officer, you shot one of my men outside of that safe house. You humiliated my boys, and you've insulted us by hiding from us for so long now. I'm tired. I'm pissed off, and I'm not waiting on you to pull another trick. If you're not down here by the time I count to 10, I'm going to burn that building to the ground. That hardly gives me time to get to the stairs, Todd shouted back. Then start running. 1, 2, 3. Then I guess you don't want to know about the tiger, Todd offered. Chen stopped. What do you know about the... I know lots, Chen, Todd shouted. I know who they take orders from. I know their safe house locations. I know their business partners and which cartels are connected to them. Donnie Chen was already sweating with anticipation. Their biggest threat, the tiger. All their information from the mouth of one cop? It was too good to be true. You're a lying pig, Chen shouted. Am I? Todd asked. Would you like to risk that assumption? Because the tiger is way stronger than you think. You can't beat them without this intel. Boss, we're running out of time, one of Chen's underlings whispered. Fine, Chen shouted. Get down here unarmed, and we'll leave you pigs alone. Glad we could do business. Tell your men to... Now! Chen bellowed, firing off his handgun into the air to prove his point. Todd winced and pulled back. That was it. He'd played for as much time as he could. The officers around him all glanced at him, and he smiled encouragingly. It's all good, guys. He set the megaphone down and started to walk to the stairs, when suddenly his phone vibrated. Curiously, he pulled out his phone and saw that he'd gotten a text. From Oichi. Close the windows. He didn't wait to ask. He didn't have time to. A sudden feeling in his gut told him that this was not the time to second-guess orders. Close the windows, he shouted. Close all of them now! His demands were loud and forceful. No one questioned him. No one argued. Some did stare, though, but eventually every officer had grabbed a window and slammed it shut. They didn't know why, but the urgency in Todd's voice was enough to get them all rolling. What the hell are you doing? Chief Bolton cried. I don't know. You don't know? Bolton asked, getting hysterical. All I know is that we're about to have reinforcements. Johnny Chen watched in confusion as various windows were suddenly shut. Something felt wrong to him, but he couldn't place the problem. He could smell a rat. Yet what was this particular rat? Was it just a precaution to keep them from going back on his word? A means to keep the Molotovs from being thrown? Boss! One of the men shouted. Look! Chen turned and saw to his surprise a large, dark van rolling up to them. His eyes widened. It was no police car, but it wasn't one of his. Arm up! He shouted. Every man turned their gun on the rolling van. It wasn't coming fast, just coasting, like it was in no hurry. His men waited for the orders to shoot it, but he waited. It'd be bad if he opened up on allies. But after waiting, the van finally came to a halt just outside of their perimeter after bumping harmlessly into one of their own cars. One of the Timberwolves approached it and paused. Boss, there is no driver. And then the realization hit him like a cannon. Run! Run! The entire building rocked with the pressure wave of a car bomb. Bodies and car debris flew in all directions. The glass of the windows that had been shut rattled, and there were screams that echoed through the brick walls. Pieces of men and machine were thrown all around, and Todd was thrown to the floor, covering his head and his heart pounding. He crawled swiftly to a window, desperate to see what was going on. Shit, Oichi, what have you done? He hissed. Smoke filled the air and made it hard to see anything. Fire seemed to envelop everything that Donnie could see. As he staggered to his feet, the ringing in his ears made him stumble as he almost immediately threw up on the pavement beneath him. He coughed and sputtered as his ears bled terribly from the explosion. Hey! He roared. What happened? Where? Pow. Pow. 2 gunshots. 3 more. 10. 50 uncountable gunshots as automatic weapons opened up all around. Any survivors from the car bomb were mowed down before Donnie's eyes. Screams of those gunned down rippled and sent him near to the point of soiling himself. Screams of those He rolled fast, screaming as he cowered behind a large police vehicle, its body being peppered by bullet holes. He covered his head, his mind trying to process this whole incident. How had it all gone south? What had he not anticipated? He'd trapped Todd Edwards inside. His information had been airtight. He locked in the police, he'd cut the power, he'd made sure they had at least 25 minutes to do what they needed. So there was only one explanation, and the very thought sent a terrible shiver down his spine. Then another gunshot. Chen screamed as he felt a sharp and burning pain shoot through his leg. He roared and hit the ground, clutching his bleeding leg where he'd been shot. He looked to see a few men in 3-piece suits standing over him. 2 had glasses on, while the other had on a face mask and a pistol in his hand. Found him, ma'am, the face mask man said proudly. He's alive like you wanted. She walked out of the smoke like a phantom. She had on a black skirt suit with a white undershirt or blouse under it. Draped over her shoulders was a long trench coat with sleeves swaying empty. She had long black hair and an oriental face that was twisted in anger and disgust. Her high heels clicked with each step. So this was her, the head of the tiger. She held out her hand as the masked man handed her a pistol he'd been carrying. Chin tried to puff up his chest.
So, what do you want, bitch? You here to bargain? You obviously don't want me dead. So what do you want? Tell me what... Pfft.
Without another word, Oichi aimed her pistol and fired once into Chin's forehead. His head rocked back as his body hit the ground with a sick thud. She glanced at the body and then handed back the pistol to the masked man who had given it to her. "Toss him in one of the fires and let's go," Oichi hissed. "Ma'am, why?" her obedient officer began to ask. "I just wanted to take his measure before I killed him. I was curious what kind of wolf would go so brazenly and foolishly to expose himself, letting his pride get away with him by surrounding a police building and laying siege to it all for his wounded pride." Oichi replied darkly as she marched away back toward the inferno from which she was coming. "But I had nothing to say to him. When all is said and done, there are no words needed when taking out the trash." The smoke and fire had been too thick for anyone looking out the windows to see anything that happened, but Todd had seen a few cars pull away from the wreckage, all unmarked and manned by people who were careful to keep themselves hidden. He didn't need to wonder who was in them. He knew who they were, and as he stepped back, he felt his phone vibrate. It was another text. "I'm sorry, Todd." Todd read the text in surprise, but also as somber acceptance. He'd thought she'd write to say that Donnie Chin was dead or that it was safe now, but instead it was just an apology. He sat down on the floor as cops ran back and forth to put out small fires and try to get the power back on. He began to text back. "Are you all right?" he asked. "None of this is all right, Todd," she answered. Todd started to text his reply, but thought a moment. He couldn't say everything he wanted to like this. If his text could potentially be retraced, he began to rephrase his text. His words had to be careful. "What happened to the dog?" "I put him down." He could feel the dispassionate frustration in her words. She didn't care one bit about the death of one of the most dangerous crime bosses in the city. This was more concerning about other matters. "I'd rather not talk about that." "I haven't forgiven you yet," he answered. There was a long pause, and he thought for a moment that she wouldn't answer him. But sure enough, there was a reply. "You shouldn't," she answered. "I didn't want to hurt you or use you, but I did. And I can never make that right." "Was it real?" Todd finally asked, breathing heavily. "Did you ever really love me?" The response was so fast, Todd felt his breath leave his body. "Yes. With all of my heart, yes." And that was chapter 20. Now for the historical context. In 1575, Takeda Katsuyori laid siege to Nagashino Castle, like I told you. You remember the story from last time. Now, though he was the son of a famous daimyo, Takeda Shingen, Katsuyori lacked his father's tactical skills and experience and believed too strongly in his father's famous cavalry. Now, he was successful in pressuring the castle for several days, but when Oda Nobunaga arrived to provide relief, Katsuyori tried to use his cavalry to eliminate the Oda forces, but Oda had set up palisades and used the rain and local river to make the enemy cavalry useless. He then used his lines of arquebusiers to lay down fire on the Takeda and break them, making a decisive victory for the Oda and changing the course of warfare in Japan forever, and thus beginning Japan's modern age of war. So this is a reflection of when Oda came to the relief of Tokugawa Ieyasu's forces in the very similar manner. So now you know. And we got one more chapter. Sorry, I needed something to drink. All right. Here we go. Chapter 21. Todd waited outside of the coffee shop silently. It was cold, and the winter wind blew a frigid current of air across his face and chest, which was slightly exposed with his jacket unzipped slightly. He didn't care, though. He brushed his hair back and grimaced at everything going through his mind. He clenched his fingers around the cup in front of him and found himself staring at the table darkly. His phone was beside the cup as if waiting for it to ring or to be used. He shot glances at it every now and then, but when he saw no change in the device, he'd go back to staring at the table. It was getting late, and the sun was starting to set.
He wanted this to be over, but he wouldn't move. Not yet. Todd? He looked up and saw her. He'd been so distracted in his thoughts he hadn't even noticed Oichi approaching. Whenever he'd been on a date with her in the past, Oichi would wear something nice and pretty, but today she was wearing exactly what he'd imagined the Tigress of Demercia to wear. A white button-down shirt, dress pants, high heels on her feet. Draped over her shoulders was a long coat that trailed behind her. Her arms weren't in the sleeves of this coat, but her hands were in front of her in a nervous posture. Her eyes, once filled with joy and merriment, were now downturned and guilty, like a child caught telling a lie, though this woman had done far worse than tell lies. So, do I have the pleasure of finally meeting the Tigress? Todd asked darkly. Oichi winced and bowed her head slightly. Todd, No, Todd interrupted. Sit down, because I need to talk and you're going to listen. He expected her to argue or resist in some manner, but instead she nodded obediently and sat down, much to his amazement. Todd coughed and then launched into his tirade. You are a criminal, Oichi. A criminal, a murderer, a thief, a liar, a racketeer. You are everything I hate about my father's family and everything I swore to stop as a police officer. And looking back on our dates and how you made me feel, it's like it was all some sick joke. I can practically picture you laughing at me whenever I kissed you goodnight, knowing you were pulling over one on the dumb cop. I can only imagine what juicy police secrets you squeezed out of me every time you bat your eyes at me or hugged my arm. Todd expected her to argue, but she said nothing. She simply sat and looked at him with sad eyes as he pressed on. Do you know why I became a cop? Because my mom died in a shootout between the Iliano family and some rival of my father's. And I swore after that I'd never be a part of it. I swore I'd end this goddamn gang war. Then, here comes the Tigress of Mercia, and she played me like a fucking fiddle. I promised, after I found out who you were, that I never wanted to see you again. That I was done with you entirely. And yet, Todd snarled and swore under his breath. And yet when I called you, you came to my rescue anyway. Todd looked up at her and his expression softened. So thanks for that. Of course, Oichi answered. It's the weirdest thing. After I left you, I kept thinking about you and what we had, and I kept asking, was it real? Or were you just using me to get intel or favors? Was I just your plaything, or... I mean, who even are you? He trailed off and looked away a moment before turning to Oichi. Oichi, I need to hear it from you. I need to know who you are, the real you. I need to hear it. Oichi gazed at Todd with a longing expression. She then sighed and laced her fingers between themselves. My name is Oichi Taiga, of the Taiga family in Japan. A daughter of Taiga Josai and member of a Yakuza family, she began. I was raised under the principles of a criminal underworld, but it was one with respect and discipline. When I was 8 years old, my father began teaching me the skills of his trade when my older brother died from a drug overdose. I learned to be ruthless, cunning, and manipulative. I learned you can fold men like origami if you know how to speak and act and behave. I learned how to dismantle and build up criminal organizations, including smuggling, robbery, and numbers running. I learned how to cleanly and effectively kill a man. I learned how to be my father's perfect black widow, as I believe the English term goes. Oichi paused a moment as Todd took all this in. And to be honest with you, Todd, I loved it. I won't pretend like I didn't. I wasn't in love with the crime, but the world around it, the order and the dignity of the Yakuza. The organization itself was like a family, and I was a part of it. Through them, I learned discipline, respect, the value of authority, so I understood the consequences of my father's head when he screwed up his assignment for the family. I can't talk about what he was involved with. It doesn't matter now anyway. But he was set to die unless I made an offer. To increase the influence and alliances of our family in America, I was to marry a disgusting mafia thug in America and create a connection between our two families. I didn't think the prospect too terrible. I've always wanted to come to America. I've been learning the language since I was small, but the legends of mafia austerity and romanticism was nothing more than a joke. I saw a city infested with a plague of sewer rats, vipers, and filthy dogs, a pariah of everything I'd grown up respecting and valuing. I hated it. I hated every part of it. But you stayed, Todd pointed out. Sometimes I wonder if I should have, Oichi admitted. It was selfish. A selfish desire to fix this disgusting city and end this gang war plaguing it. By becoming the head of its most notorious criminal syndicate, Todd snarled. Oichi met his eyes, and though they were still sad, there was a ferocity burning there. I've killed people, Todd. I've looked men in the eyes as I gunned them down. I poisoned the fool I was set to marry. I destabilized 5 different organized crime groups since taking over the family, and then integrated them into my own. I won't deny I've done terrible things. But let me ask you this. Has the city not been aided by my actions? Todd swore slightly but said nothing more. He hated to admit that she was right. The Taiga's influence had started to bring stability to various areas in the city, and there was no denying either that the Taiga Syndicate was more respected and appreciated than even the police were in various areas. It doesn't make it right. If the city could be saved by the law, I wouldn't have been needed, Oichi replied. Todd, you asked me earlier if what we had together was real, or if I was just using you. And I'll be honest with you, more honest than my heart thinks I should be. I won't deny it. Yes, I did take advantage of our relationship for intel. I did use your position to get information and use it to our advantage. And there are 5 cops in your own precinct who report to my syndicate directly with new info. Todd bristled and started to snap back, but Oichi held up her hand sharply. But that doesn't mean I didn't love you.
Your definition of love is screwed up,
Todd snapped. I won't make excuses for it. I know I used you and hurt you. I was trained to manipulate people, and that's what I did. It's second nature. But loving you has changed so much about me. It's even made me question my priorities and my goals. For so long, I merely wanted to save the city and rule the criminal underworld, to succeed where my father failed, to strengthen the Taiga. But you being with me makes me forget I'm even a tigress. When I'm beside you, Todd, I'm just Oichi. I'm me. Todd started to soften his expression before another thought jumped to his head and he stiffened. And I'm supposed to believe this now? You said yourself you're a manipulator, a liar. So how do I know any of what you're saying is real? Oichi looked at him for a long moment without speaking. Then slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a flash drive, sliding it across the table to Todd. What's this? Evidence, she answered. For what? My syndicate. Everything you need to bury my organization. It's the locations of my warehouses, the amount of guns and drugs smuggled daily, the names of our suppliers and runners, the names and addresses of all my lieutenants and underlings worth anything, the names and profiles of my informants in the police, and stolen autopsy reports of anyone and everyone I've killed to get where I am. It is all on that drive. Todd nearly dropped the drive in shock as he realized what he'd just been given. This is... I'll give it all to you, Todd. Everything. All I have. She then reached out her hands and held them out expectantly. And I'll give you myself. You can arrest me and take me in. I won't resist. I'll even testify to my own guilt.
But what about your goal? Your father, your family?
Todd asked. It's like I said, Todd. Loving you has changed so much for me. I don't want it anymore. If being the Tigress of New Mercia means not being by your side, then I'd rather watch it all burn. Todd's mouth was hanging open in stunned amazement. He'd stared at her in the drive and shook his head. But, Oichi, my life is in your hands, Todd, and that's how I want it. I swear I won't ever lie to you or hurt you again. Todd picked up the drive and stared at it. He then leaned across the table and slipped it into Oichi's outstretched hands, closing the fingers around them. Oichi gazed at it in shock, and then through tearful eyes she looked at Todd, who was holding back tears of his own. I can't do it, Todd whimpered. Damn it, I can't do it. As a cop, I want to, and I know I should, but as a man, and as a keeper of the peace, I just can't. Todd, I can't save this city. I can't fix it, no matter how much I may want to. It's a cesspool of the worst kinds of bastard this world has to offer, and the police have done nothing to help the community. My stupid father even warned me I was wasting my energy, but I didn't want to believe it. Until now. I've seen what you've done. I've seen the results of your crusade on Mercia. So I know that if I take this, if I turn you in and break apart your syndicate, I'd just be plunging Mercia back into chaos again. As horrible as it is, I can't undo the work you've done that I've been too weak to do. Todd looked away from her, his face flushed and his hands shaking. I'm betraying everything I ever swore to do, but damn it, Mercia needs you more than it needs me.
Todd, I need you, Oichi whispered, taking Todd's shaking hands. He pulled them away. Don't say that to me. Don't say that. I don't want to hear it. Todd, I promise you that I am going to save this city, but I can't do it without you, because if you're not here with me, then I can't keep going. Oichi cooed, finally walking from her seat to sit beside Todd on his side of the table. Todd didn't protest this time. He stared into her eyes and hers into his. I can't save the city until you save me. Save you? The Tigress of Mercia needs saving. Todd muttered as their faces drew closer to one another, hands touching. I have never been more alone and afraid than being without you. When you walked out. I love you so much, Todd.
Damn it,
Todd whispered. And I love you too. Todd finally gave in and kissed her. The two held the kiss for minutes, both smothered in the other and holding on for dear life. There was no Taiga Syndicate or police force or even Mercia. No right or wrong. Just this. And when they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, holding on to each other as they hadn't done in weeks. Todd smiled weakly. I missed you. I missed you too, Oichi choked. All right. I'm here. I'm here for you. I'll help you in any way that I can, Todd offered. Oichi shook her head. Let's not talk about that now. None of it. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. I want you right here, right now, please. The two were already grabbing for each other again as the night drug on and their lips met, and released again, and then met again, and then released again, and then met again without stopping. Neither would go to bed for another hour, and when they finally did go to bed, it was in the same room. And that is chapter 21 and the last chapter I have written. And if I'm being honest, there's no historical context to that part. I just wanted the romance to keep going. Alright, well, that wraps it up. I will release a poll later deciding what we read next. I'll have to think about the options. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of this story, what you thought of Shogun of Crime. It's one of my more dark stories, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope this was a fun experience for you guys, and that about does it. Will I continue the story? Yes, after I finish the one I'm working on. But anyway, thank you all so much, and as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.